Welcome to Season 3 of the Soundstage Audiophile Podcast. Last year, host Jorden Guth got a crash course in the fundamentals of hi-fi from enthusiasts, journalists, manufacturers, and music industry professionals alike. And those lessons will continue, but this year, Jorden will also get a history lesson from the legends who were there from the giddy-up and who made hi-fi what it is today. So with that out of the way, here's Jorden and this week's guest.
Hello and welcome to the Soundstage Audiophile Podcast. Today we are joined again by two of the leading men behind Simaudio. We have Dominique Poupart, the product director, and Étienne Gautier, the chief commercial officer. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hi, Jorden.
Hi.
The basis for today's conversation centers around the pros, the cons, the good, the bad, and the ugly of manufacturing products in Canada. Or locally to wherever a company's based. The idea of staying close to your manufacturing methods. I think to kind of get this started, the last time we had both of you on, we started the kind of conversation by getting to know how both of you got into hi-fi.
Right.
Yeah.
For today, can we give a little bit of a backstory of how Simaudio originally got started, the company itself?
Well, none of us was there when it first started, but in 1980, the founder of Simaudio, his name was Victor Sima, and he used his name to found the company. So it was Sima Electronic when it really started. And it was a very humble beginning. He was passionate about audio. He was trained in audio electronics, and specifically for audio, he had learned in Israel. And so he founded a company and he started building amplifier in his own basement at home. So it was very humble beginning, but I guess that most companies starts just like that, you know? And so he started building his amp and got some success and some sales, and then going. Then starts renting a small industrial condominium and hired employees and build and build and build. So and it evolved for now 44 years to the company we are now. So.
And was his original building in his garage in his basement, was that in Montreal? Was that in Quebec, Canada?
In Quebec, it was in Saint Hubert.
Oh, no way. Okay.
Yes, which is where I live, actually. The very same small city. Now we are in Boucherville. So it stayed in Saint Hubert until the year 2000. And since 2000, Simaudio is now located in Boucherville, which is actually 10-15 minutes drive from Saint Hubert where it first started.
All right. So still a very close proximity to its beginnings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if I may add, Victor's philosophy when he created Sima Electronics was to develop and create, high performance but affordable products. So, he's got that philosophy of, super high end, but for, a better price than what he found on the market at the time.
Yeah.
And, he was really an artisan at the beginning and then hired some people. And when it grew up, some people acquired the company from him and really developed the manufacturing processes to a much more professional, way of doing things, I would say.
And I guess right at the beginning, just simply based of necessity, it was he was doing everything in his basement, in his house. As things kind of started to progress, was there an emphasis on keeping the manufacturing close? Was there an idea of I guess this was kind of before this huge push to move everything overseas.
Yeah, well, I may sound strange saying this, but I believe it's so part of the culture of the company that we thought about it sometimes when we have issues and problems and tough times, but in reality, it's so part of our culture that it's not a question that we ask ourselves that much. I mean, we think about doing things here, at the factory. So, yeah.
Yeah, the thing from the beginning, with production in Quebec and Canada, is that obviously Victor was doing everything by himself, and then eventually he wanted to develop production. The new investors, which was Jean Poulin, the second owner of Simaudio, he invested a lot into production, tools and, a new factory and new buildings and all that. But Jean's philosophy also was to keep control of the manufacturing, and he's got that, I don't know. It's kind of one of his hobby, doing things by himself.
Yeah.
When you meet Jean, he's doing everything like this. He's building houses, he's doing his garden. So for his company, it was just like normal to do everything by ourselves, which, just followed what Victor was doing in his basement. And then actually, I think it created a strong tradition and became one of the pillars of our philosophy, of our manufacturing philosophy as a company, to keep as much as we can in-house. So obviously, during the 80s, a lot of manufacturers started to buy a lot of parts in Asia, and even, moving their production to Asia for cost reasons and all that. But, even if we looked at that solution, because, we are offered regularly, OEM solutions from Asian companies and all that, finding the quality, finding the sustainability, and many aspects are also important for us, like how they treat their employees, environmental protection, and we never found processes that were suitable for us compared to what we were able to do in Montreal.
Well, and I can imagine there comes a point in a company's lifespan where you're growing at a pace where if you want to take the next step, you have to decide one way or another. Like, do you want to invest in the tooling that's needed to kind of start down that path? Or do you take that money that you would invest in tooling and instead put it into overseas stuff, and then you have that money, the extra money, presumably, to then invest in marketing or XYZ? Was there were you guys around that inflection point where you saw okay, we are going to start investing in the tooling needed to get to the manufacturing where we want it to be in-house?
The thing is, the company grew every year at a reasonable pace, but never such a big ramp.
Not the hockey stick growth that you see in tech. Stick shape. Yeah.
So when there was investment, it was per steps. I mean, now we have several CNC machine and, a tour, pick and places, oven. We have everything we need to build everything, but it didn't come from nothing to this, It was a progression. We started with one CNC, So we had supplier before that were machining our parts. And we were doing some of the CNC. That's in early 2000 when I joined the company. But then we realized that we were preferring to do things ourselves and making better quality control and more efficiency and everything. So then we grew and added more CNC and things like that. And also the electronics. Now I don't think we could, make it without all our pick and place machine and sophisticated things. But if we go back to the time of Victor Sima, everything was soldered by hand.
Okay.
So the company evolved with the technology and the time at the same time. So it went more naturally, if you follow what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's kind of an interesting thought, even in and of itself. Like, when companies choose to manufacture in-house, is it a way that you could stay ahead of current technology, or does it mean that you're actually slower to adapt current technology because you don't know what's out there? You don't have a Chinese manufacturer that's saying, hey, by the way, guys, we have this new process or this new machine at every turn. You almost have to kind of learn what's available in the industry.
Well, I travel a lot, maybe surely not as much as you, Jorden.
I think you're up there.
But still, I travel and I can see and I can, be aware of what's going on in other factories as well. But the technology in audios are evolving in a way that is independent from the manufacturing technology, I could say. So, of course, now there's surface mount technology for the components, the electronic components. But I mean, that's an evolution. But I mean, it's independent.
Yeah. And also our requirements for audio are not on some aspects, obviously, the same as, Apple, for example, for their phones, which requires, the latest technologies of integration because they don't have a lot of space to build the phone. When you make an 861, you have the space inside the machine to put some boards. So even if, our current circuits and, the way we develop units, obviously, if we would do the same with the components from the 80s, probably the amp would be twice the size as it is right now, because, the components were much bigger. And, as Dominique said, there was much more cables and all that. So now everything is fully integrated, but still we don't need the micro integration as other electronic, manufacturers need in computers and phones and all that. Nonetheless, we're using very advanced machines and technologies in our SMT line. For example, we have a point-to-point soldering machine that is quite unique in North America, that is coming from Germany. And this allows us to control at the same time, our production rates and quality at the same time, because obviously we're making high-end units. So, you were talking earlier about suppliers and the reason why we're doing things internally. And this is one of the key points as well. We're not buying crazy quantities of aluminum or parts or all that, but we are extremely picky on the quality of the components to what makes a moon unit at the end. And obviously sometimes it's difficult to find a supplier because of our requirements. So sometimes it's just easier to do it by ourselves and to control the process. Also, it gives us a huge flexibility when we need parts at the last minute. Being in control of the process, allows us to, change our production schedule in, depending of our needs or the engineering demands or the service at the same time. So we keep hands on a lot of aspects doing things by ourselves.
And you kind of mentioned something there that I find really interesting, because the entire audio world saw this giant spike of demand during COVID. So when you're manufacturing in-house, you are obviously at the mercy of some components and some suppliers for raw materials and other things like that. But did something like COVID, could you imagine if COVID happened and you weren't manufacturing in-house? Like, how would that have changed what Simaudio was able to kind of produce and put to market?
I can't speak for the others because I haven't lived through COVID in another company, but I heard that several brands had delivery problems because of that while we were shipping like never before. So it was good, but it also was it was very tough anyway because there were shortages of parts. And so we went as crazy as redesigning some front panel board because the microcontroller we were using wasn't available anymore or was very scarcely available. And there were some other parts that we could source. So we really redesigned the whole thing. From the user point of view, it didn't change anything. It behaved the exact same way, but we went through redesigning stuff and rebuilding stuff just to make sure that we were still able to produce. And so this is a kind of flexibility that we have that maybe others have less, I would say. So that allowed us to go through COVID with success, although it was still some kind of a nightmare because of, a pandemic is still a pandemic with all this.
Yeah. You didn't escape the pandemic in general. You were just able to kind of adapt a little bit more differently.
Yeah.
Or differently.
Right. And of course, in Quebec, it was even worse than in Ontario, where we are, Jordan, because the government had fully closed the factory that was deemed non-essential for a few weeks or a month or something at the beginning. So we were forced to close for a while. But then after, when we got back, we worked hard, and it went through success.
Yeah. And also there was a lot of speculations during COVID on the parts prices and raw material pricing as well. Aluminum cost went crazy, and we are lucky enough that there's a big production of aluminum in Quebec, but other manufacturers that are in countries where there's no production of aluminum were paying their aluminum like crazy pricing and had to ship it with, crazy shipping costs. If you remember the shipping costs during COVID went, to the roof. It was a, crazy challenges in terms of manufacturing during COVID, and there was the fire at the factory in Taiwan for semiconductors as well. If you remember, Jordan.
Yeah, that's right. It was an earthquake or something like that caused a fire, some sort of natural disaster that led to the fire.
Yeah, but that company produces, microcontrollers, DACs, and that are used widely in the industry.
Yeah.
So it's, it added to the COVID crisis. It was a special time, I have to say, in terms of manufacturing, you had to be creative, finding solutions and being able to, still produce and survive, because, that was the question at the time.
I think one of the coolest things that you mentioned, Dominique, was this idea that you redesigned a component. You had your engineers essentially redesign how something functioned, not to the end user. The end user gets the same experience, but in order to kind of work with what you had available at the time. Do you find that because presumably manufacturing in-house, you have more skilled people in-house than you would otherwise? Do you find that leads to other advantages, having like the whole group of skilled individuals in-house?
Yeah, like for example, let's say we want to make a prototype to validate some design that the engineers are doing. We can, squeeze that production of this prototype in between two production run of other boards that we're making here. And so we can have the board, made tomorrow. So, and then we can test right away. So this gives this type of flexibility is greatly helping, the product development.
You're not waiting for shipping from, let's say, Taiwan or from China or something back to Canada and back and forth.
Admittedly, of course, we need to wait for the bare board itself. But assembling of the board and everything is going to be made in-house and very quickly. And it is the same for any aluminum plate or aluminum board or aluminum parts that we would need, or heat sink or whatever. So we can get very creative because we know we can make prototype. You speak to the gentleman, you eat with him at the lunch, hey, we're going to get this part tomorrow, yes? And then he says, well, maybe not tomorrow, the day after, But if we were making thing far side in another country, I mean, I'm sure they're very competitive and they can be very responsive, but still just the transport is going to make it longer anyway,
Yeah.
So...
And also, Dominique, something that is related to that, other electronic manufacturers in our industry are actually they are engineering department and sales department and marketing department, but they are not doing the manufacturing. They are subcontracting the assembly of their units to other companies that are specialized in that. So they're doing a great job. But in terms of reactivity, in terms of flexibility, in terms of control, quality control as well, obviously, having it done by someone else creates a lot of other challenges. And, if you look at the other company that are part, not in our industry, but in the industry of luxurious goods. So, Vuitton, you take Rolex, you take all those companies, they are controlling the full manufacturing process. Start to finish. So obviously they are buying raw material. They are buying leather, and then rework it and all that. But Rolex is doing their own steel. They're doing their own gold. They have foundries doing this for them, by them. So they are controlling everything just to make sure that the Rolex quality is kept at a level. And I think, this is really our philosophy as well, being in control of everything, because at the end, you can make sure of the quality of your units and you can give a 10-year warranty as we do. Another example is that if you open a Moon unit, there's many, many, many components inside that are custom made for us. You can see on the sleeves, on those components, on those capacitors, on those resistors, on the transistors. All those components are custom made for us by the components manufacturers. So even there, we are in control of everything.
I love it. We're going to take a quick little break. And when we get back, I want to kind of dig a little bit deeper into this idea of the warranty period. For those that weren't on the phone call that we had a few weeks ago that actually led to this discussion, the warranty period was a really interesting piece that we kind of were talking about. And that led to us saying, hey, let's make an episode of actually manufacturing local. So hold on just a second, folks, and we'll be right back after the short break. Welcome back. Just before the break, we kind of touched very briefly on this idea of warranty. And Étienne, you mentioned the 10-year warranty that Simaudio products offer.
Yeah. Actually, this is something we're doing for a long time, like at least 25 years. So we give a 10-year warranty on all electronic parts in our unit, and we're very, very proud of it. Obviously, we give that 10-year warranty because, as I mentioned previously, we are in control of every aspect of manufacturing. So we control all aspects of quality, and we are super strict on quality control. And this is a real benefit that we give to consumer because we are proud of everything we do, everything we make, and we are not shy to show it. We show the inside of the units on our website. We are very, very proud of that. And, I think it's also a statement to the consumer by giving that 10-year warranty saying, hey, you know what, we're so proud of what we're doing in terms of obviously musical qualities, but also in terms of manufacturing, that we're giving you a 10-year warranty. But it's not only that, we are also giving almost a lifetime repairability. What I mean by that is that we still service units that were made by Victor Sima in the 80s. We still have parts. It's regular that we are manufacturing new parts to be able to service them or find ways to service them when the parts don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So repairability, sustainability, being there for our music lovers that have chose Sima, Celeste, and now Moon, is very, very, very important. But all that would never happen if we didn't have dedicated service and support people to guide the consumers and music lovers, but as well being able to repair with a lot of experience the units.
And I guess you kind of touched on it, the idea of serviceable life. So there's one thing, which is a warranty, which is great. And that kind of puts your stamp of, this is what I believe in the manufacturing, and the electronics are going to last, and all this and all of that. But that serviceable life is interesting because it's not just, there is an element that you need the components to kind of make that work and make that happen. And I know there was a fun story about, I think it was CD transport lasers that we could kind of touch on after. But there's also this idea that in order to have a long serviceable life of a component, you need to actually have people that have the knowledge of how to actually do it. And then diagrams or kind of knowledge transfer of that as well. Is there like the folks that actually work at Simaudio, are these the same folks that were around for the last 20 years, or what does that look like?
First of all, I'm going to mention that I've been with this company for 13 years and Dominique for 24. Next year, 25. So that's going to be a special mark for him. So there's going to be a little party, and but it's not rare actually. A lot of our employees are staying with the company for a long time, and when we started, Victor was alone. Now we are 60 people in the company, so we're not a gigantic company, but quite a good sized company for our industry, I would say. But what is, I think, more important is the dedication of our employees, how proud they are to work for Simaudio, building Moon units every day, how passionate they are. We have so many music lovers in our employees sharing their favorite albums in our monthly newsletter, sharing experience they have with other speakers and equipments that they can find. And, it's really like an amazing crew. And, having all that in Quebec, creating local jobs, following people from their studies. Thierry, our CEO, did internship at Simaudio when he was a student. And now he's the CEO of the company. And, stories like this where have happened multiple time, and people grow with the company. I started as inside sale, and I'm CCO now, and it's a huge pride for myself, growing and achieving what we do today with that amazing company and those amazing people.
There's this idea that not only is Simaudio selling kind of worldwide, there is also the local element of Simaudio. So the folks that are there doing the manufacturing are probably there doing a lot of the repairs and a lot of the kind of servicing on the components as well.
Well, we have a team, a department for service, but they relate to each other. They have lunch together. They chat, and they can go on the production floor to discuss about things. But officially, we have a service department where people are working on repairs and servicing units, while we have the production people that runs uninterrupted to build the unit with an efficiency. So it's different teams, but of course we're in the same building and we can exchange at any given time.
Does that help as you start noticing if there are like specific issues or things that could be done differently? Like, do you find that the communication between those groups of people or the entire stream of people?
Well, actually, your getting to a point that other brands maybe do not have that kind of luxury, but sometimes, we're not perfect, or sometimes we see things that could be improved because we see a unit in service.
Yeah.
And then the technician in service realize, oh, this thing happened, whatever. And then we realize, you know what, maybe if it can be made differently, this would never ever happened. And so we have these discussions, sometimes from the service to R&D, sometimes from the service to production, depending on what is the actual detail, because we're not speaking about something big here. We're speaking about the detail either of building or design.
Yeah.
And with these interaction, we can quickly, ramp up the quality and reduce the number of potential issue and things like that, which is something that a brand that has thing made at a factory and then the service made by elsewhere, and they don't have these type of turbocharge quality of effect, if I can say it this way.
The integration between the people is not there because potentially they're just like literally countries apart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And so the people building some other brand's amplifier may be never seeing this amp ever again. While here we see the units that were built, if they come back, so it's very different dynamic.
Yeah. And also we rely a lot on our employees' experience. For example, before the launch of North Collection, engineering, tested manufacturing processes with our longtime employees that are used to assemble moon units for sometime decades. And then we can test and find the better way to improve manufacturability as well as quality, as well as, efficiency at the same time. And it's all based on their experience and, personal qualities of just being proud of what they do as well, and they are part of the process. And we strongly encourage them to give feedback, on every steps they do in their day-to-day job.
Does this, like when we talk about industries, any manufacturing industry has like different failure rates and different things that are inevitable, because as much as you aim for perfection, you might not get there on everything or on every specific component and all that. Do you find that this is giving you above average failure rates, or I should say below average failure rates?
I would think so. Of course, I don't know the failure rate of the other brands precisely, so it's a bit hard. But the feedback we have got from our retailers and our distributor is with Moon, they're confident that it almost never breaks. And apparently it isn't the case from others. But I believe we have a lower than average failure rate. Yeah,
I think so as well. But it's not only the, how could I say? You can consider that there's a failure rate for the unit, but there's also the failure rate for the company. What I mean by that is that when you're not answering a phone call, when you're not answering an email, when you're not there for your partners, it's the same thing as, having a unit failing on the field.
Sure.
So, it's not only having a low failure rate on, what you produce, it's being there on every step for your partners, dealers, distributors, and of course for the consumers if they have questions and all those steps. And I'm actually very proud of all the feedback and all the love we get from our partners and from the consumers about the quality of what we're building and how it plays music, but also on the quality of our service and support when it's time to be there for them.
And a part of that, I can imagine, is the turnaround time on servicing as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So sometime, and you were mentioning that CD player story.
That's a good story. I like that one.
Yeah. So when Philips discontinued the CD Pro 2 drive, because it's our philosophy, we bought a huge quantity of them just to be able to service CD players in the future.
And just to kind of let people know, this is you're speaking about the laser that goes into the CD transport.
Yeah, and it was for the Andromeda CD player, which was our top of the line CD player back in the days. And this laser beam was very, very expensive because it was a very, very good one. But at some point, it was decided to be discontinued by Philips, and we bought a huge quantity of them to be able to give service to our consumers. And at some point, other manufacturers didn't do that and were requiring to us to sell them those CD transport to be able to service their own CD players. So you can tell that it's not everybody's philosophy to actually doing this. And this is something we're doing with every model we discontinue.
Dominique, you were going to say something.
Yeah, just a small correction, because everything Étienne said is true. But I mean, it defined not just the laser, but really the Philips CD Pro transport is a much bigger thing than just the laser itself. It's the optical lens, but it's also the motor, the thing that slides this everything.
The entire component element of it.
Yeah. This dates back a long time because it was in the Andromeda, which was a CD player in the 2005. And so it's been a while. By now we have switched over to Moon Drive, which is made of some parts that were molded, that were made for other drives that we use, but the design, the servo control, and the assembly of the final assembly, and the suspension and the damping is all made in-house. And we have stock for all the parts that are molded, and the optical lens and the laser themselves, we have a huge quantity. So we can continue to build CD players, but surely service all these units with the Moon drives in it, which is a very, very positive thing for a CD player lover, because we can, service everything in this drive.
Yeah. And we still service Andromeda.
And we still service Andromeda.
Which is, you mentioned it's a 2005 product.
Yeah.
Well, even longer than that, because the Moon Eclipse from 1999 also used CD Pro transport, which we can still service because we have some stock.
So 20 plus years of service life and going.
Yeah, and going.
Now, one interesting thing with this, you're kind of mentioning that the newer drives, you were actually doing the molding and stuff. How do you choose what to manufacture in-house versus what to kind of purchase from another supplier?
Well, of course, plastic molding doesn't make sense to be done here because of our lower volume and the cost and the space and everything. And basically, we don't do so many things in plastic anyway. So such parts are made in huge quantity in Asia, and it makes sense to be done there. There are parts like this where it doesn't make sense to be done here at the volume we're making. So then it's fairly easy.
What about other components? So is there other components that you kind of look at and you say, should we bring the manufacturing in-house? Or should we use a supplier that is meeting our quality and kind of ethical concerns to kind of get that?
Well, of course, all the electronics itself, I mean, semiconductors, resistors, things like that, they all come from Asia. And it's not just us. It's any brand in the world, because there's almost no manufacturing of semiconductor in America. And this is changing, by the way, but it's a bit of a different topic. But mostly, the very vast majority of semiconductor and small components are made in Asia. But pretty much everything else we do in Canada or even in Quebec, depending. So depends on how customized is the parts and how critical is the part. And then we decide if we make it ourselves or if it's made by a supplier, a local supplier, or if it makes sense because it doesn't change anything, then being made elsewhere to reduce cost. But it really depends on what the part is.
And sometimes it's just a part of the process of making, a component that is not done by ourselves. For example, if you take the top of a North Collection unit, we machine the aluminum, we machine the top and all that. We finish it, but then the painting, we're not doing it. Yeah. So it's a local company that is doing it for us at our quality level, obviously. But, for the volume we've got of parts, it wouldn't make sense for us to build a paint shop inside the factory, at least for now.
This is where I was going, because we actually have had discussion about this, about how great it would be if we wouldn't have to, transport the parts and paint them as they come out of the CNC, and maybe one day. But as Étienne said, at this time, maybe not. But we'll see.
I can imagine that could get to the point of like, if you had it in-house, maybe that could have like limited edition colors or more stuff like that. There's more flexibility there, but whether it's worth it.
Yeah, sure. This is exactly the type of creativity that you can have when you actually build everything at your place. But we're not there yet with regards to the paint, but we'll see.
But another example of creativity that we, the fact that we're manufacturing, many things by ourselves gives us the ability to create the BRM1 remote control.
I love that remote, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. And you know what? Now that I look at it, I'm pretty sure that if we wouldn't be able to control so many aspects of the manufacturing, we wouldn't have done the BRM1, or it would have been much more complicated to do and to manufacture. There is so many aspects in that remote control, in aluminum, in plastic, in assembling, in mechanical adjustments and all that, which are very, very complicated. And all that relies on our history, our ability to design, our ability to manufacturing, and, the experience of our employees to assemble very tricky, complicated, and high-end fine products. And,
some of us think we're crazy of building it. And actually, I almost believe them now, because it's quite a challenge, admittedly. With regards to manufacturing and several other aspects, especially with the glass. It's a bit of a complicated thing to build. But I remember Doug visiting the factory at the beginning of the Nord collection and seeing his face looking at a BRM1 in its part before being assembled, on a bench of one of our technicians assembling the BRM1. And he was like, boy, you really do everything. And yes, in the case of the BRM1, besides the OLED screen, the part screen, of course, but all the mechanical parts, the machining, the metal parts, everything, the boards, everything is made in-house. And this is one thing that is quite small. A bit like Étienne was describing earlier, speaking about the difference between an iPhone and a big power amp. In the big power amp, you don't have this space issue. But in the case of the BRM1, there's a lot of electronics in a small amount of volume. So this is a bit of a different thing for us to build, but we're very, very proud of it. And I think it has a place in the hi-fi world for us.
Well, I mean, what struck me from the remote is that I've experienced a lot of hi-fi systems, and that remote was the most fun experience that I've had adjusting volume. And I don't know why, I don't know how to describe it. It was a really cool experience. Now, thinking about that in terms of the North Collection, which is your current collection of products, the BRM1, the remote, is essentially, I'm going to say, the least expensive of the products in the North Collection. So the manufacturing in-house is not just for your highest end. It's not just for the top of the line. It's for everything that you folks produce.
Well, actually, there's the more affordable, the most affordable product is a small funnel preamp that is about the size of a, how can I say, maybe a cigarette box. It's around $500 in US, let's say, and it's made in Canada. Of course, it's a smaller box. It's a very efficient and nicely designed phono stage, but still, it's made in the same way as the pricier models in our lineup. So,
with the same quality control
by the same folks.
Line. Yeah, absolutely.
And to stay competitive, of course, it needs to be designed in a way that it gets assembled very, very quickly. So you are a few screws away from building a unit. You know, there's a few parts, one electronic boards, and there you go. So even if it's made in Canada, we stay competitive because it builds a few minutes to assemble. So.
That just had me think about something else. And it's this idea that when you're the designer of a product and you have somebody else manufacturing it, the engineering resources that are used to manufacturing the product, when they're not, essentially when they're done with your project and they've moved on, they have other companies that are probably lined up to do it. For Simaudio, for companies that manufacture and do all the stuff in-house, what do those different resources, like what do the engineers do when they're not in a kind of a product development cycle?
Well, we're always developing something.
Ooh.
I mean, yeah, we're always working on things, either improving or working on some stuff for future product and things like that. So they're never
concepts. We try new technologies. So even if it doesn't end up into a future model, we try ideas. And this is why at the end also, when you look at the North Collection, everything is unique and everything is new. The volume controls are completely new. The DAC, the digital part, all the amplification section, everything was new. But some of those concepts were, tested and imagined, years ago. And then we just were waiting for either the ability to transfer them in a sellable machine and units, or just for the unit that would be, the best to use it. And this is, I think, one of our forte is always being creative. Always, trying to improve what we've done, having new ideas, even if it never, translates into, something existing. But, we stimulate ourselves, trying to think outside of the box. And something that you've said about the BRM1, that, it felt very natural for you. It reminds me when Steve Jobs, introduced the iPhone and he said, you need a stylus, to play with your phone. And we use the most common stylus that everybody got, which is a finger.
Yeah.
And actually the BRM1 is like that. When you want to adjust the volume, it's not natural for you to press plus and minus. You just want to roll the volume control because, this is what you've done since the 50s. You're turning a knob. So, that's the universal movement to adjusting the volume, turning a knob. So the BRM1 is just doing the natural thing for everybody. So this is why, it's got such a success.
I love it. So, and I know we're kind of running out of time here. I want to wrap it up. The last time both of you were on here, I asked what music you would listen to just for fun, outside of work, outside of any kind of testing or anything like that. I'm going to pose the same question to you guys this time. Is there any new tracks? Is there any new artists that you're kind of thinking about and you're saying, well, these guys are great?
You know what? Actually, lately, I've been not, we've discovered new tracks, and Dominique probably has, many in mind right now. But right now, I'm actually coming back to some of my teenagers and early 20s listenings. So I'm listening to a lot of Smashing Pumpkins actually lately.
Nice.
Yeah. And another band which I think is more well known in Europe called Placebo.
Yeah.
And listening to them a lot. And actually, I have a lot of great memories attached to those albums and those piece of music, which I think it's great. Just give me so much energy, and love it.
What about you, Dominique?
Well, as we grow older, it looks like we're having more difficulties finding newer groups or artists, I believe. And sometimes we refer more to our older things that we loved in the past. And Étienne is making me remember some of my music. And I realized that one of an album that I really enjoyed is now 30 years old. And I find myself really old. It's because in 1994, there was the Portishead album, Dummy. And it is so great. And it's funny because it kind of sounds very bad and very good at the same time. Because there are some kind of, added distortion. It was before it becomes quite usual. Some kind of distortion used as creating music and some kind of slide, which is very anti-audiophile, but the way it was made, it was very creative and really cool to listen to. Mm-hmm. So this album from Portishead, and I always had trouble saying the name of the band anyway, so Portishead. But it is one of my favorite, and it's. Yeah. I realize it's 30 years old about today, so.
And you know what's funny? It's actually yesterday with the marketing guys, I was discussing Isaac Eyes. Because they didn't know that Portishead used some Isaac Eyes samples in their music.
Oh, no way.
So I told them, you need to listen to Black Moses and Shaft and all those albums from Isaac Eyes, and you'll find the roots of the music you've just mentioned and the inspiration. And
everything that's old is new again.
Yeah, absolutely. But, and also about that specific album, Black Moses, that I love, which is, a great feature again, is that the original vinyl record, when you bought it, was you could unfold it. And it was like an Isaac Eyes in cross, like Jesus, the whole album unfold like this. And it was just amazing, like the concept of the whole object of it. And just so creative.
I love it. Yeah. Thank you both for joining us. I really appreciate you guys taking the time. And I'm excited to speak to you again in the future. All the best.
Thank you, Jorden.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Jorden.
Yeah.